So we're going to talk about emotion management tonight, ladies. You know, as busy women, most of us understand the importance of time management. We all, there's classes and courses and websites and apps and everything designed to help us more wisely use our time. But have you thought about the importance of emotion management? I mean, we all have emotions. And it's a gift of God. I mean, it's the way we're created to have emotions, so they're good. But most of us aren't all that proactive in managing our emotions before they get out of control, which can set us up for some really difficult days. And it can also affect our relationships and how maybe even how productive we are. So when we show signs of emotional balance, we've been trained by society to ask who are we supposed to ask? Who do the commercials tell us to ask?
Doctors.
Yep. Ask your doctor, right? It's at the end of every pharmaceutical commercial on the planet. That's who you're supposed to ask, your doctor. And that's because the pharmaceutical companies use doctors as their marketing arm. They give them samples. My aunt, that's what she used to do for a living. She took samples of drugs to doctors' offices and went from office to office, giving them samples, kind of like the Avon lady, just here, try this out. And you may have been to the doctor before where they give you samples because, they've got their stash of them for you to try out and see how it works. That's because that's what they're trained to do. They give them these samples and train them how to direct their patients toward the answers that these companies claim to have, which happens to be what they're selling. So when I see the long list of side effects that come along with a lot of these things, it gives me a long list of reasons to look somewhere else for answers whenever at all possible. And I'm just so you know, I'm not anti-medicine at all times. There are times when it's necessary, but I think we're way over dependent on it and it gets abused and people get, dependent in a really unhealthy way. And it shouldn't be the first place we go. I want long-term answers, and I want more than something that's just going to mask or numb my emotions. I want to be proactive and handle them naturally by pursuing healthy behaviors and including the use of, when possible, relaxing plants that work with my body instead of using mind-altering substances that force my body to do something else, something that it may not be wanting to do naturally. And that's the difference, because essential oils, as we all know, are not drugs. Essential oils help our body, support our body in its efforts to do what God designed it to do. And that's what we're after. So as a very drug-dependent culture, the more we take, often the sicker we get. And as a country abundantly overflowing with food, the more we eat, sometimes the less nourished we are. And as women who've been told we can have it all and do it all, and, it's not going to affect us because we can do all these things, sometimes we wind up less satisfied than ever. So let's examine, and probably exhausted from it too. So let's examine a few factors that can negatively affect our emotions. So a lot of things can set our emotions off, and we're going to discuss different ways tonight. But one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is the unhealthy way we relate to one another. In other words, our lack of boundaries. And Amy and I were talking a little bit about that today. We train others how to treat us. And so if you feel overextended or maybe taken advantage of by your friends or your family, you may want to examine how assertive you are or aren't. Often we think that saying yes to the requests of everybody that asks us for something makes us nicer or kinder. But what I've seen and experienced myself is that a lot of people that say yes all the time don't really mean yes. They say yes, and then they give in to whatever inconvenient request they got, but then over time they begin to resent it. Okay, so they're just giving in because they're afraid to say no, or they're people pleasing or whatever. But really, it starts to build up resentment, and when that happens, they become a very not nice person. Right? Have you ever done that where somebody asks you to do something and you're like, oh, I don't want to do this, and you say yes anyway, and then you're secretly kind of irritated with that person for a while, especially if they ask you yet again, then you blow up at them, right? Because you weren't assertive from the beginning and actually honest with what you wanted to say. So if you've ever had a conflict with an extreme yellow personality, you probably know what I'm talking about. They wind up, can blow up at you after being so nice for so long. And you're like, where did that come from? I had no idea that was even bothering you. It's far nicer to learn to be assertive and say what you mean. And that's where boundary setting comes in. When you have boundaries, your relationships will be healthier because everyone understands what's expected. It's not fair to tell someone yes to something you don't want to do, only to resent them in your head, because it's often the result. That's what winds up happening, is you wind up resenting them. And then negative emotions toward that person are the result. And that can happen with your kids too, where you tell them yes when you really don't want to tell them yes, but you don't want them mad at you. So that happens especially when kids get into their teens and they start to be more manipulative, maybe in a smarter way. Asking you when you're tired, or asking you when whatever you want them to clean their room, and they try to wheel and deal. You can get that way with your kids, but learning to be assertive can if you can learn to be assertive, then you're learning to be proactive in heading off some of those things, so you don't get in that position. Plus, it just causes a ton of stress and anxiety in your life, and that affects your emotions because you get exhausted by all that overcommitting. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Sometimes no is the nicest thing you can say. Also, make sure you're setting boundaries with yourself too, right? One way to set boundaries would be to get enough rest, but also to not put so much on yourself. I know, especially when I was a homeschooling mom, I mean, my kids are grown now, but when we were homeschooling and there's always just so much to do. And my husband was a pastor, and there was always ministry needs and things that I had to do. But I also put a lot of things on myself that nobody was actually asking me to do. I wanted a perfect house. I wanted everything to be exactly the way I wanted it. I wanted everything to be a certain way when people came over, because we did a lot of hospitality, and we would have 50 to 75 people over at our house, sometimes weekly. But I would want everything a certain way, and everything had to be homemade, and everything had to be, and some of those things were just my personal thing that I wanted to do. And I put those, so I did over time learn to set boundaries with myself. It's like, you know what, I can let that go. As much as I want to do that, I don't have to do that. And I need to just relax and let it go. And sometimes that's really hard for moms, or especially for women who tend to be perfectionistic. It's like learning to let things go is actually setting a boundary for yourself. So it can be really important for your mental health. Another boundary would be getting enough rest. How many people are guilty of not always getting enough rest? And you have to be proactive with that, because if you just wait until, if you just kind of not have a bedtime, not have whatever, you can stay up on your computer way too long. You can sit on your phone under the covers, and that is not healthy, having all that in your bed with you. I raised 7 daughters. So with all those hormones flying around, there were times when our household had a lot of drama going on. One daughter in particular, and those of you who know my girls, you probably know which one I'm talking about. But one of my daughters in particular tended to be known for getting really dramatic. And I don't know where she gets that from. But one night she came in really extremely emotional about something. And so we were having, one of those mother-daughter talks, and it was not getting anywhere. I'm like, honey, you're being completely irrational. This is not, listen to what you're saying. And she'd start crying, and I don't know what's wrong with me. And she just, and I'm thinking, yeah, I know what's wrong with you. It's those hormones, and it's late at night. And I said, I think if you just go to sleep and we talk about this in the morning, it's going to be completely different for you. And I gave her some oils, and I prayed with her, and she went to bed, and she got up the next morning. She's like, Mom, you were so right. I have no idea why that was such a big deal last night. It was like his mercies are new every morning, right? It's like a totally different. I mean, have you ever had an argument with your husband really late at night? I mean, I can remember being so emotional over something that I wanted to convince him of. and he would, he wasn't seeing things my way. So I took it personally, and it was like the end of the world. We can just not even deal with this, because this is, unless you can hear me and understand me, I'm just not gonna let go of this. And I would just get so emotional about it, or cry myself to sleep or whatever, especially during pregnancy, hormone times. That was a big deal. But once I'd wake up in the morning, I would be kind of embarrassed over making such a big deal out of whatever it was the night before. So getting enough sleep can make a huge difference in our outlook and how we can handle emotions. And so when you're not able to get enough sleep, that can affect everything. And so one thing to consider is what all is keeping you from being able to sleep. So are you staying up too late on on technology? Because that can affect whether or not you get enough sleep, or whether you stay asleep, or whether you sleep well. So turning off technology at least an hour before you go to bed can be very, very helpful. Also, taking a hot bath in some Epsom salt. Epsom salt has that magnesium, so you infuse your essential oils in the Epsom salt, and that can have a very relaxing effect. And what are some oils that I would put in that Epsom salt? I mean, I'm trying to find my list here. Some of my favorites are vetiver, frankincense. I like to put all of those, rutabaga. I don't like the smell of rutabaga, but I'll tell you what, it works. And it has valerian in it, and I can smell valerian a mile away. So that's what other people like the way it smells. It's like, because it's mixed with lavender and stuff, but I just can't. So, but it works so well. And valerian can actually be taken in a capsule. I used to take that when I was pregnant for back pain. I'd get that from the herbal store or whatever. And that's why I can't stand the smell of it, I think, because I had morning sickness, and that smell of that valerian would get on my hands, and I couldn't get the smell off my hands. But valerian is very powerful. Also, taking Imupro an hour before bed, and also unwind. Unwind it's not just for kids, y'all. That can actually help you too if you're just having trouble overthinking things. I don't know if anybody's like me, but I can tend to ruminate on things until it gets me so worked up. Unwind is really helpful for that kind of thing. Reading before bed, also cutting out sugar and caffeine like after noon for sure. Just don't eat it during the day, especially if you have trouble sleeping. An herbal tea is good. That's true, Gigi. Yes, nice warm tea. And that warmth actually helps you to get sleepy too. Getting cozy, and that's why the hot bath is helpful, but also sitting by the fire under a blanket with a good book, that can be very relaxing. If you have little ones, cuddling up with your little ones and reading them a story, that can get you both ready for bed. CBD Calm is excellent. That one, just applying it to your brainstem and your temples and then inhaling it, that can be very, very helpful. Also the bottoms of your feet, if you like to touch your feet, not like me. So all those things are good. And these oils can all be diffused too. Keeping a diffuser going in your room is very helpful. And one thing that I read somewhere is that the red light, instead of using like a night light, use a light that has a red setting, and that can help you. It doesn't interrupt your sleep. That's why on our diffusers, if you have your diffuser on the red setting at night, that can be really helpful for sleeping. Also, listening to the Bible on audio is another one. But setting yourself up so that you're not overly tired is really helpful. I mean, I think about, as a mom, for those who are moms, think about when you took your kids to the grocery store when they hadn't had a nap and they hadn't had lunch. Do you think that you're going to make it through that day without some kind of meltdown? We're the same way. It reminds me of a story of this lady that was in the grocery store with her toddler, and the toddler was having a complete meltdown. And there was this lady that was kind of behind her watching, and the toddler just kept, she kept begging for things, and the mom kept saying no. And then she saw her in one of the aisles, and she's throwing herself on the ground and crying that she wants candy and she wants this and she wants that. And the mom keeps saying no. Then they get in the checkout line, and the lady's behind her in line. And the mom said, the child has another meltdown about candy. And the mom said, Kendall, we need to get through this checkout lane. Just a few more minutes. And the child just screamed louder and demanded candy. And the mom said, Kendall, just a few more minutes, and then you can go home and have some lunch and get a nice nap. And the lady that was watching all this wanted to encourage the mom about what a good job she was doing. So she said, I just want to tell you, you're doing an amazing job with Kendall by not giving in to her and staying calm. And the lady turned and said, oh, her name isn't Kendall. My name is Kendall. So she was talking herself off the ledge. So sometimes mom needs a nap too. And so we need to remember that. Take care of yourself just like you would your child, and also be proactive just like you would your child. We do make preparations for our kids in those ways. We probably wouldn't take them to the grocery store without a nap and without lunch. Do the same thing for yourself, because your emotions are important too, and your emotions are going to affect your family and those around you as well. So we talked about a lot of different oils that are good for helping us get ready for bed. But what about people who have like significant struggles with sleep for other reasons, maybe emotional reasons? I mean, some of you were in our freedom class this past summer, or was it this past summer, or was it last fall? I'm confused. No, I think it was last summer. Anyway, some of y'all went through the freedom kit with us. It's the set of oils that we did here. And I know, Crystal and Amy were involved in that. And it was very helpful for a lot of people. We had a lot of people getting free of a lot of things. And it also helps, again, with sleep. That's why the first part of it is the freedom sleep. But the oils themselves are helpful, but also going through them, using not just positive affirmations, but what we call truth affirmations, where we use the oils while we line up with the truth of God's word. If anybody's familiar with my book, Truth Drops, that's what it's all about. It's about associating the scents with the truth of God's word, so that when you smell it, that's what your mind automatically goes back to, kind of a positive trigger, in other words. So that's something to think about if you do have trouble with sleep, is use the oils with the truth affirmations. And this is a good kit to start with. And you can do this with your kids too. I had one of our moms, she's an adoptive mom, and she had children that came with a lot of baggage, and she used that with them, and it was a very positive thing. And that child, even though they were so little, knew to go to their oils when they were struggling either emotionally or trouble sleeping. And if you have kids that that have trouble with sleeping, just put it into a roller ball so they can apply it, and put it by their nightstand so they can apply it themselves in the middle of the night if they wake up. And they can learn to self-soothe that way too. And speaking of some of those kinds of issues, Crystal has some things to share with us about the emotional side of things.
Okay, can y'all hear me?
There you go.
Okay, cool. All right, so these are last minute notes, but I'm excited for the topic I'm going to share. Stacy had asked me if I wanted to talk about unresolved trauma. Sure. And I'm going to couple it with stress. I'm going to couple it, probably not just stress, but like chronic, undealt with stress, because we all have stress, but when it gets toxic is when we're not dealing with it, kind of like Stacy was talking about, when we're avoiding taking care of ourselves in different situations. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight, is unhealed trauma and stress. I want to keep this super simple and informal. I'm sure a few of you know that I'm working on my master's right now. I'm actually in grad school to become a therapist, or officially, it's licensed professional counselor. I'm also a disabled veteran with service connected PTSD and anxiety. And just for funsies, I also have childhood trauma, which just makes me a more well rounded person. So, of the topic of trauma and stress and how it relates to our emotional well being is an ever present subject before me. It's also something that I think, at least in today's society, is just an ongoing, regular conversation. You can turn the news on, you can scroll through social media, and somebody is talking about mental health, trauma, whatever. So prior to learning about aromatherapy, beyond the idea of detoxing my home from candles or the harmful fragrances, I didn't know anything about aromatherapy and its role in helping with emotional health. I didn't know anything about it. After about a decade, though, of being a Young Living member and immersing myself into my own mental health healing, I've learned quite a bit about how powerful the nature of aromatherapy and the important role that our sense of smell plays on our emotions and processing traumatic stuff. In an effort to keep this super simple and not triggering, or at least low level triggering maybe, I just want to focus on the day-to-day stuff that can happen or things that we witness that I'm going to refer to as little t trauma, or how prolonged stress can impact our emotional well-being. So there is a concept in the mental health world of big T trauma and little t trauma. Big T trauma, think of like the worst kinds of things that could happen to a human being. I'm not talking about that. Those are like extraordinary events in someone's life. And I have my own big T trauma, but we're going to talk about little t trauma. These are things that you might witness that don't actually happen to you. It could be you just happen to see a car accident happen, or think about 9/11. For the people that were at ground zero, that's big T trauma. But the people that were seeing it on the news that were, hundreds of miles away in a different state, in a different country, it's little t trauma. You didn't actually experience it. You witnessed it, but you didn't experience it. That's going to be considered little t trauma for the purpose of our conversation. So right now, there are many stressful and scary current events happening nationally and on the global stage. We are all in some way affected by the media reporting, or possibly even directly impacted by things that we're seeing happen on social media. We're just kind of scrolling, and then some media thing pops something in front of our face. You could be directly impacted if you live close to the areas of crisis. So think about the things that are going on with you, Ukraine, or events in the Middle East, train collisions in Michigan and Ohio, etc. The brain takes stock of these events as we watch the clips on the news or scroll through social media posts, and our brain is going to determine a level of threat to us personally. For some people, these events can cause little change in their thinking or their emotions. It doesn't really, it's like, oh, that sucks for them, and then they move on with their day. However, there are people that will be emotionally charged or even jarred by an event, basically by the mere possibility of the danger to them or their family. So there are going to be people who see the news and hear all the bad things happening and think it is in their backyard. Realistically, it is not, but for whatever their brain, or for whatever happens, whatever reason, the brain just goes on high alert and has decided it's in our backyard. So this can cause something called hyperfixation that can consume a person's thoughts, and it can create anxiety and panic. If left unchecked or left unprocessed or allowed to sort of take over, this would be considered little t trauma. And children are more susceptible to this than adults are because we have access to our prefrontal cortex. We have access to reasonable, rational thinking. Children do not have that access until sometimes till they're 25. So nothing has happened, but the witnessing of a traumatic event can interrupt the brain's ability to logically acknowledge the realisticness of a person truly being in imminent danger. So one of the courses I've already taken was talking about childhood brain development. And I thought the imagery they gave us, the object lesson, was beautiful. So imagine this is your brain. And this front part is your prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain that is going to receive information and make logical, rational decisions, which most children, teenagers, and young adults are not fully developed in this place to do. So they are guided by their amygdala, which sits in the center of their brain. So when you see a child who is having a rough day and throwing one of those temper tantrums, just understand they flip their lid and they are being driven solely off their emotional center of their brain. This happens with little t trauma and big T trauma. For whatever reason, this part doesn't get access and people flip their lid and they are just guided by this. If something doesn't happen to calm this down and explain you're safe and everything's good, maybe you misunderstood, or something is told to the brain that says you're not in danger, then what will happen is it stays like this. So the person is just going to always be in fight or flight or just this heightened emotional state. And I love that object lesson because it makes sense. If you ever hear somebody say, oh my gosh, they flipped their lid, that's what they mean. It means for whatever reason, this front part of their brain went offline and they are just in fight or flight, freeze or fawn mode. And for some people, if that is left unchecked, if they can't process and talk through whatever it is, narrative they've got going on in their head, it can start to escalate like a snowball effect. And it can take over and create chronic anxiety, chronic worry, chronic stress, which then affects sleeping and heart. There's all kinds of physiological effects that this can have. So going back to leaving that unchecked, this could cause difficulty sleeping. It can cause low-level anxiety or worry that impacts one's ability to eat. So there was, Malachi was reading something in Job where it was talking about he couldn't taste his food or something. Y'all, that's depression. That wasn't, he didn't have COVID. He didn't lose his sense of taste. He was depressed and food didn't taste right because he didn't have the desire to eat. Or maybe the person overeats. They eat to soothe. There is something soothing about eating, it could be the smell of the food, that they are using as a coping mechanism. These emotional responses can cause physiological reactions, headaches, tension headaches, upset stomach, unresolved pain or chronic pain, heart palpitations, all the things you can think of. The world has been spinning for thousands of years, and each generation must cope with the effects of wars, economic crisis, crime, or catastrophic weather events. So these kinds of traumatic events aren't new to mankind. How we cope may have evolved or de-evolved through the generations, but in our generation, the one we're currently in, we have so many healthy tools at our disposal. Stacy was talking about, yeah, you're going to be told to just go to your doctor. There are other options, not in lieu of, but in complement of seeing a doctor. Aromatherapy being a particularly powerful tool as it bypasses the reasoning center of our brains and it goes straight to the part of the brain that's going berserk, which is that emotional control panel. And it can help calm that down first so that we are capable of thinking clearly and reasonably. So back to that flip your lid concept. If you're experiencing some sort of stress and you are recognizing that your thoughts are irrational, that there is no Bigfoot in your backyard coming to get you tonight, and that's why you can't sleep. If you can access this part to calm down, because your thoughts are being motivated by a fear, and then engage this part, your prefrontal cortex, things will resolve. You may have to tell yourself over and over. You may have to talk to a therapist. You may have to journal. You may have to do some deep breathing exercises. You may have to dig deep in your past and find out, why are you afraid that Bigfoot is coming to get you in the middle of the night? So those are just basic things. What's interesting is I read an article today that was published in 2018 on Psychology Today about unresolved trauma and what it does. And there is this concept that is fairly new within the last decade, that unresolved trauma causes chronic physical pain in the body. And it's mostly linked to early trauma, like something that happened to you in your childhood. And I want to tell you about something that I still think is a little T trauma, but it escalated in a child's mind to being this big thing that followed her and consumed her most of her life. And it was this story of a lady who was going through this course to learn how to create a coherent narrative. My therapist has done this with me. If there is something that you have believed about yourself that just doesn't make sense, and you can pinpoint when maybe you first felt that, it usually revolves around an event. Chances are in your childhood. And in this case, this woman felt that all the bad stuff that was happening in her life had to be her fault. And going through this process of creating a coherent narrative and writing down something that happened to her as a child, she was able to share with this group of people that when she was a little girl, her parents had taken her horseback riding, and she'd done this before and it was no problem. But her parents consented to her riding a horse that had not been fully broken. But they were like, it's fine, the horse has never flipped out, it's safe, but I'm just letting you know he's not fully broken. In the course of the ride on a trail, the horse got spooked, ran into something because he didn't slow down fast enough. And when he ran into whatever it was, it killed the horse. And the parents' narrative began right then to tell the child that it was her fault. She should have known how to stop the horse, slow down the horse, whatever. And so it was her fault that the horse died. And so in that one, probably 10-minute conversation, she was made to feel bad, and that the reason the horse died was because of her badness. Her parents also made her write letters to the family that owned the horse ranch place and apologize for killing their horse. Now, as an adult, I think all of us are hearing this story going, what bad parenting? Like, that's awful. We would never do that to a child. But in this circumstance, how many times could you possibly think that maybe something not as exaggerated as a horse dying, but something has been spoken to, yeah, Beth does. Something has been spoken to a child that creates a narrative in their mind, a belief in their mind about themselves, that unless and until they're willing to sit with those feelings and create that coherent narrative and see it from the perspective of an adult now as what really is the truth, then you can understand how those feelings, despite the best of her ability to overcome, was difficult for her. And so I thought that was really interesting, because in this study, they were saying all the adults in the class, they pointed out that it didn't make sense for her to take responsibility for the death of this horse. In fact, they saw it was the neglect of her parents, not her. And I would say even the ranch had some onus in that. But that woman had carried that feeling of shame for her entire life, all believing that entire time that anything that bad that happened to her was deserved because she killed that horse. It sounds so stupid, but to a child, that narrative gets created and it creates those pathways in her brain. You can understand why somebody would go through life thinking, well, I don't deserve anything good. So when we don't resolve past trauma, little t or big T, it will haunt us. It will come with us. We will carry it into every relationship. We will carry it into every job. We will carry it every night before we go to sleep. It will come with us. And so using this idea of creating a coherent narrative in order to process and resolve even the smallest of traumatic events, coupled with aromatherapy, I believe can be incredibly empowering and powerful. So the oils that I have used over the last several years, just going on my own trauma healing journey, Valor is a big one. If you know me, you know me. In fact, I went to go get it before this call, and I had 3 5-milliliter Valors in my bag that sits in my purse, if that gives you, and Valor's not a cheap oil. It's not, but it helps me. Lavender, start with the basics. Lavender has so many research publications on PubMed on it and how it helps the brain chill out. Frankincense is another one. Any of the citrus oils are mood elevating or mood boosting. It's also mentally clarifying. It can help kind of calm the brain down, but also help the brain think clearer. It can soothe and calm and just kind of lessen the loud noise of unhelpful emotions. If you're looking for a protocol, a lot of people want a protocol. My greens want a list of what to do and how to do it and when to do it. The Feelings Kit is a great start. Everything's in there. You guys can find the instructions on how to use it. I have used that one many times and have loved it. From there, you can graduate to the kit that Stacey was talking about, the Freedom Sleep and Freedom Release. Sleep is important. Your brain needs a break from all the thinking and doing and planning and fretting and all of those things. And if we're not sleeping, then our bodies aren't getting the rest in order to meet the next day fully prepared. So Freedom Sleep and Freedom Release. Stacey's book, Truth Drops, is an excellent resource if you're desiring to incorporate scripture into your aromatherapy emotion protocol. And that's all I had for tonight. I could talk for hours. When Stacey said, do I want to talk about unresolved trauma, I literally said out loud to Malachi, oh, could I talk about it? I could talk about it all day. So next up is Amy Corrigan. She's going to talk about hormones and nutrition. Your hormones, ladies, and the quality of the nutrition that you're getting each and every day has an important role, and it influences our emotions as well. So she's probably going to tell us a lot of things that we need to know.
Thanks, Crystal. I always love listening to you talk about this. It's fascinating. And I know you're learning more like every day. So that's so cool. So hormones is sort of my wheelhouse. And the reason that it's my wheelhouse is because I basically lost my mind about 15 years ago because my hormones were so badly unbalanced, and I didn't know. The doctors just kept telling me, take this birth control pill. Oh, that one didn't work. Well, try this one, and they never addressed, like Stacey was talking about, they never addressed exactly what was going on. So that's another call for another day and time, but that's why I became so obsessed with researching these things. And that was before I was even using oils. So then when I started doing oils and I found out all the oils that you can use for hormone balancing, and what's so cool about the oils is that they work synergistically with your body. So they're going to balance is what they're going to do. So that's super important with hormones. If you research hormones, you'll find that most of the most reputable naturopaths and functional medicine doctors agree that balancing your hormones and the ratios they're in is the most important thing. So, which is great for us because oils are so good at doing that. And then of course, Young Living has Progessence Plus, which is amazing. I was already on natural progesterone before I started using oils. So when I found out we had that, it was like, yes. So you guys know that when your kids, if you have kids, especially girls, but boys do it too, when they go through puberty, Stacy was talking about this. It is some fun times. Yeah, Stacy just typing what I'm saying. So the main reason that happens then is because their bodies are being flooded with hormones, and so what they're used to having hormone wise as a child is being completely changed. And while that's a totally natural process, as is menopause, which we're going to talk about, it takes their bodies a while to get used to it, and it takes especially their brains a while to get used to it. Your limbic area of your brain, which Crystal knows all about and could talk to us for forever about, and my husband, who's a biochemist, has an entire class that goes into that in extreme detail. But your limbic area of your brain has crazy high numbers of all sorts of hormone receptors, but especially of progesterone receptors. And so hormones definitely affect your brain. And like Stacey said, if you've had a teenager going through puberty, you know. And then if you yourself have or are in the process of going through perimenopause or menopause, then you know that we're not the exact same thing, but very similar things happen when your body is adjusting to the lower levels of hormones that happen when you go through menopause. In my case, I was going through early perimenopause because I was about 32, 33 when I started having all the serious problems. And I literally felt like I was going crazy. Like my husband, who is not he's not anti-medicine, but he's just like, let's figure this out let's figure something else out before we go to meds. He was like, you've got to go on meds because you can't live like this. I just was in constant like fight or flight. Like if the laundry is not completely folded and put away, then my entire world's going to come crashing down. I felt like I was going crazy. I felt like something bad was going to happen all the time, like this dread and fear just all the time. My anxiety was absolutely out the roof. And then I found out it was all because my hormones were not balanced. So it's a very well-known fact that depression and anxiety are 2 to 3 times more common in women than they are in men. And a lot of part of this is just society, because women are just expected to do everything in our society. We're expected to have a career. We're expected to, have our houses clean. We're expected to have our husbands fed. We're expected to have. Now it's like if you want your kids to not be being indoctrinated, you need to have them home and homeschool them at the same time that you're having a career. And so that's part of it, I believe. But another part of it is that our sex hormones just can make us crazy if they're imbalanced. Your sex hormones are actually, especially female hormones are even more so, the most potent chemical signal that affects your brain and your body. And that's what they are. They're chemical signals in your brain. And so when your hormone levels change, they influence the neurotransmitters. 2 of the main ones are dopamine and serotonin, which are huge in your anxiety, mood, depression, all that. So they're going to affect your mood. Estrogen, for example, is a neurostimulant that has antidepressive effects. So when it starts to go down, when we're going through perimenopause and menopause, then it's very likely that you could have a depression effect from it going down. The flip side of that is that high estrogen levels can aggravate symptoms of tension and anxiety if you have too high levels. And so another common thing that goes on, especially in our society with all the chemicals and endocrine disruptors that we have, is estrogen dominance. Now that's where the ratio of your estrogen is too high to balance out the progesterone and estrogen ratio in your body. So you actually could have normal levels of estrogen and have low levels of progesterone and still have estrogen dominance, if that makes sense. It's the ratio that's important. So when you go and have a blood test at your doctor, if your doctor's not super thorough in analyzing the results, they might tell you, oh, well, this is in normal range and this is in normal range, but the ratio is what's important, because you're supposed to have way more progesterone than you are supposed to have estrogen. Estrogen is a way more potent hormone. So that's what you need to look. If anybody needs help with getting testing for their hormones and reading the results and all that, reach out to me, because I have tons of experience doing it, and I love to help people with that because it was a life changer for me. So reach out if you need help with that. Progesterone, we already talked about how your limbic area of your brain has high numbers of progesterone receptors. Progesterone is actually called the happy hormone. It has a calming effect. That's why I say use progesterone at night before you go to sleep. Some natural progesterone, Progestins Plus. Progestins Plus is a super, super low dose of progesterone, guys. And then it has oils that work synergistically with it. So in my opinion, and of course, I'm not a medical doctor, disclaimer there, but in my opinion, every woman can benefit from using Progestins Plus, and you are not going to get an overdose of progesterone. First of all, that's highly unlikely to happen because progesterone levels go out the roof when you're pregnant, and it does not affect you in a negative way. And secondly, Progestins Plus is amazing because it's not a high dose of natural progesterone. It has the oils that work synergistically with it. So it's just a tiny dose of progesterone, but it can work wonders, and it has changed people's lives. So it's a great product. If you have low progesterone, it can lead you to have anger issues. It can lead you to have anxiety. And especially if it is super low and your estrogen is normal or high, because then you've got extreme estrogen dominance. Other things, their thyroid obviously is a huge organ with that controls your hormones. It controls a lot of the release of hormones from other glands. So you definitely want to baby and take care of your thyroid. If you have too high levels of thyroid hormone, then you can have anxiety from that. If you have too low, you can have depression. So you definitely want that balance there. And it definitely affects other hormones besides just the thyroid hormone, because it also releases things that control the other endocrine glands. So it has a huge effect on so for general hormone balance, you want to take care of your thyroid. Let's see. Endocrine disruptors, they're huge, and they're the primary cause of having estrogen dominance. You hold on to endocrine disruptors, which are chemicals that mimic estrogen in your body. You hold on to those in your fat cells. So over time, they get worse. It can get worse and worse and worse. And then when you get older and you're going through menopause, you're dealing with the effects of that, plus the effects of your hormones changing again. So you want to stay away from those. How can you do that? Thieves cleaner is, I clean everything with it. And just about every cleaner that you use, conventional cleaner, is a potent endocrine disruptor. But everything that we put on our skin, especially food, is obviously important. But your skin, when things go through your skin, it's like 10 to 100 times higher absorption rate than when you eat it, because your liver does not filter it. It goes straight into your capillaries and your blood system. So anything you put on your skin is going to be a potent endocrine disruptor if it's a chemical. Lotions, cosmetics, shower gel, shampoo that goes through your scalp, laundry detergent that has those little particles that make it smell good for a long time, and it's sitting on your skin all day long. That's horrible. My naturopath, when I was balancing my hormones, told me the two things to get rid of first in your house is fabric softener and fabric softener sheets, because they have the fragrance encapsulated, and it's crazy potent, and it will stay in your clothes for weeks or months. You've seen the commercial where they put the Gain, and then a month later they can smell it on the towels. That's because it's encapsulated in more chemicals, and you're just putting crazy amounts of chemicals in your body all day long. It's just sitting on there. And fabric softener sheets are horrible. When I see people talk about, the Pinterest posts where you take them and clean your baseboards with them and all these different things you can do with the fabric softener sheets, I'm like, oh my gosh, no, do not touch those things, and do not put them in your home. They're horrible.
Amy, I think there must be a similar chemical in those plug-in things too, because we were at an Airbnb and I walked in and about keeled over. And so I went and collected them throughout the house and put them out on the back porch. And when I came in, my hands smelled like it. So I washed my hands. And no matter how many times I washed my hands, I could not get the smell off of my hands. It was horrible.
Yes, I'm sure. And I think I was on the phone with you one time when I was at my friend's house. She has those things in every room of her house. And every time I go, I'm like you, I'm unplugging the ones that are anywhere near to me. And I get a headache, like a massive migraine almost every time I'm at her house. And it's maddening because she has the oils and she can use.
And when that happens, you can walk outside or leave and you're still smelling it, not just on yourself, just I think it's in your
Yes.
nostrils and everything. It's
Nasal
just, like,
passages.
stuck to you. Yeah.
And anytime a scent lasts that long, it's because they put some extra potent chemical on top of the fragrance to make it horrible. Okay, so a couple things that I wanted to talk about are things that you can use to help balance that are natural things. Estrogen balancing oils. We have tons of those. Clary Sage is one. Dragon Thyme is one. Honestly, almost all essential oils are phytoestrogenic, which means that they are estrogenic in nature, but they are natural and they're super, super mild. And I could talk about this for 30 minutes, but I have done tons of research on this. And I truly believe that if you have phytoestrogens in your system and you're using them daily, that they will protect you from the xenoestrogens and the endocrine disruptors because they will fill the receptor sites and then it's harder for the endocrine disruptors to get into your system.
Well, it's kind of like what we were talking about, the way that the essential oils help your body to do what it's supposed to do. It knows what they have an intelligence in that way. God created them that way to where it's not going to fight against what your body is supposed to be doing.
Yes. And another thing, I already talked about Progessence Plus. It's one of my favorite things Young Living makes. I think every woman should be using it from the time your girls are like teenagers, young teenagers. I think everybody should be using it. Femigen is one that is very helpful during menopause, perimenopause, because it's very good. It has lots of phytoestrogenic components in it, and it helps your estrogen. It helps you to adjust to your estrogen levels going down. PD 8020 gives you the precursor to make your own progesterone, which is always a good thing. So does Prenalone cream. Ladies, put Prenalone cream on your girls, for lack of a better term. Just trust me, it's great for them. That and frankincense. Those two things. Just every time you take a shower, put that on yourself. And the other thing that I want to talk about is Endoflex for your thyroid, general thyroid health. I put that over my thyroid every day. And sometimes if I have an afternoon slump and feel like I'm going to fall over and go to sleep in the afternoon, I'll put it under my tongue. And Amanda Friedel told me about that, and it's super, super helpful. So we're going to come back to Endoflex because Gigi has a good testimony, but I just want to real quick talk about nutrition and emotions. I'm going to do this super quick because we're about to run over, but your brain is always on, your brain is always working. And because of this, it needs food, it needs fuel, and it gets that fuel from the food you eat. So I tell my kids, especially my one daughter who is crazy, crazy picky about food. She has all these issues, feeding issues she's adopted, and she's horrible at eating. And I tell her, if you don't eat good food, it's like if I went to the gas station and put half water and half cruddy fuel in my car, it's not going to run right. Well, your brain constantly requires fuel. So you need to use premium fuel for your body and your brain. If you eat food, whole food that has vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, you're going to protect everything in your body and especially your brain from oxidative stress. If you eat processed food with refined sugars in it, your blood sugar is going to fluctuate like crazy. Inflammation is going to go out the roof, and oxidative stress is going to go out the roof, which results in impaired brain function, which can result in worsening symptoms of mood disorders because your brain and the limbic part of your brain are highly responsible for your mood and everything that goes on with your anxiety, depression, anything like that. We had a whole class where we talked about gut health and how your gut is a second brain. Okay. So serotonin is an example. Serotonin regulates sleep, appetite, mood. It inhibits pain. It does all sorts of things, and it's a good hormone. It's a good substance in your body. 95% of your serotonin is produced in your GI tract. And if your GI tract is not healthy, you've got leaky gut, gaps in it, and all this stuff, then you are not going to produce serotonin like you're supposed to produce serotonin. In many cases, people are depressed or have anxiety, and they literally cure it by going on a whole food diet. And I'm not saying that's always the case, but it does happen a lot of times. So definitely eat just whole food, do Whole30, eat whole food for 30 days and see how your mood, see if it helps your mood. And I almost guarantee that it will, at least to some degree. We talked about good bacteria. Good bacteria is crucial to have in your GI tract because it helps all of these things. It helps to produce serotonin. It helps you to absorb your nutrients, which you need for fuel for your brain. It limits inflammation in your gut. It limits inflammation in your whole body, and it activates neural pathways because you literally have a second brain. There's so much research being done on this inside of your gut. So your entire small and large intestine are basically like a second nervous system. And so you have to treat it like that. So you want to do whole foods, low refined sugars. You want to do pre and probiotics. We've talked about this in our gut health call. You want to do fermented foods whenever you can, high quality ones, or make your own if you know how. You want to make sure you get plenty of fiber, especially prebiotic fiber. ICP Daily is a great source for this, and it tastes amazing. You just put it in your water. It tastes like passion fruit. Stacy and I love this stuff. We drink it every day. It's amazing. It's a great prebiotic. And of course, Life9 and the Mighty Pro are probiotics. You need that. That's actual bacteria, the good bacteria that you need. Ninja and Sulfurzyme are also, especially the powder, are also great sources of prebiotics. So you want to keep your gut for your emotions and your emotional health and your brain health. Huge is gut health.
Amy, I don't know if you heard about the study that Dr. Purser did. I just recently heard about it, and I don't remember the exact numbers now. I could find out though. But he did and if for those who don't know, Dr. Purser is the one who partnered with Gary to formulate ProGesence Plus. Mm-hmm. And he's a medical doctor, specializes in women's health, and focuses on natural methods. But anyway, he did hormone testing on, I think it was 400 women. I'm pretty sure it was 400 women, and of all of them, you know, how out of balance they were or whatever, and he put them on was Master Formula. Which is like our Young Living's multivitamin. Okay, it's a packet of different vitamins, but that's the only thing they did. They didn't use ProGesence Plus, didn't use any of those things, and I think it was like 85% of them came into balance just with Master Formula. That's just nutrition.
Yes, I mean, Doug has literally studied so many multivitamins, and his opinion is that if you can take my Master Formula even every other day, that it's better than any other multivitamin out there. You need trace minerals. B complex is huge with hormone balance. And Super B is one of the, if not the very best B complex out there. It's one that I take every day, and if I don't take it, I can definitely tell a difference. But you definitely need trace minerals. They're huge in hormone balance, and Master Formula has tons of those in it. It has everything you need in it. It's an amazing.
And Super D too. Vitamin D can really affect
vitamin
emotion.
D is actually classified as a hormone. Yes. Yeah. So you definitely need Super D, and you definitely need Super B.
And if your hormones are out of whack, I can almost guarantee you your D is not where it needs to be.
Oh yeah, most likely, yes. Another thing that affects your mood majorly is melatonin. If you have high or low levels of melatonin, it can cause depression. I personally don't think it's good for you to take a large dose of melatonin nightly, but I think it's great to take melatonin at least once or twice a week. If you take it every day and it's not just a small dose, then your body can get dependent on it and stop making its own. But I do like a half an Pro or like a low dose melatonin at least a couple times a week, because melatonin is another thing like serotonin that is, and another thing, a lot of people that are depressed have high cortisol. So you want to check that, and cortisol is something you can use for that. If you you can get a saliva hormone test and it'll show your cortisol also. And cortisol, it's one of those things where it's like a bad cycle, because if you have high cortisol, you can have depression or anxiety. And then your anxiety can cause your cortisol to get even higher because you're constantly in a fight or flight and your body's constantly making cortisol.
That's where I used to describe that feeling as feeling like all my nerves were on the outside of my skin, which is a really depressing feeling. But you feel so jacked up, it's hard to say you're depressed because you just feel jittery. My husband would say, "What's wrong?" And I'd say, "Nothing and everything."
Yeah. And if you have high cortisol, then it also robs your body of progesterone. And so then you've got that multiplied effect, because low progesterone is causing you to be more anxious and have more mood swings. So it's just a bad cycle. And Cortistop is great for that. And so is Prenolone cream, because it helps you make your own progesterone. And it helps if you're getting robbed by high cortisol progesterone, then it helps. So we talked about the thyroid and Endoflex. So Gigi's going to talk about how she used Endoflex. Endoflex is an amazing whole body hormone balancer. So she's going to talk about that now.
Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Amy. That was wonderful. I'm going to ask for a replay on the thing you said to apply with frankincense. What was it? You said, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay.
Frankincense and Prenolone cream.
Prenolone cream. Okay.
Prenolone, is it cream or lotion? I don't know which it's called, but Prenolone. It basically it's like a precursor to progesterone. So it helps you make your own progesterone, but it has other stuff in there that's good too. But yeah, and mix that with some frankincense. That's what I do.
Nice. Okay. So Endoflex. I have my bottle here, but I do recommend when you do get it, you apply the roller cap on it. This is my lavender. It's the closest thing I could get. But Endoflex, I swear by it. It's my everyday morning and night. I apply it over my thyroid, like Amy had shared, and just above my adrenals. And I also put a drop under my tongue, or I will drop it on my Ningxia drink in the morning. And on top of that, I apply it on my daughter every single morning, my 5-year-old, down her spine, diluted. I dilute the bottle and I apply it on her spine. And sometimes we joke around and I'll say, maybe we should apply that after mommy picks you up from school, because it'll give you like the second half of the day with us and keep you balanced. But Endoflex is amazing. My testimony, if I could just share, like I'm a very emotional person. And I swear with this, I've had opportunities, I feel like, that I could have cried, and I don't feel emotional like in that way anymore. So I think it's my hormones that have balanced out, and I'm just thriving right now. And it's because of the different protocols, not just Endoflex, but Endogize and taking my master formula and my Progessence Plus. It's just a little bit of everything just coming together and building on it. And yes, having our emotions under control is definitely a great thing. And I really have felt it. I've been using Endoflex now. Let's see, I bought my Young Living box 2 years ago when I started my specialist degree. That's how I got into oils. And as I was looking at what to order, because, once you get your box, you're like, okay, I'm set. And then you realize there's so much out there for Young Living. And so I started researching endocrine system, which I didn't even know about. And like it says here on the little blurb that I wanted to share, that unless you have thyroid problems or anything like that, you're not going to know what the endocrinologist does or what they're all about. But I've definitely felt that this is an amazing oil, and I don't want to live a day without it. And like you said, also, Amy, if you need a little pick me up, grab it, apply it, or put it under your tongue, and you're good to go. So it's been a great journey with my experience with the Endoflex. I think every woman should be using it. Do you want me to share a little bit more, or like you want me to share a little bit about it, or?
Sure. Feel
Yeah?
free.
Okay, so basically it's saying that the Endoflex supports the healthy thyroid function, which is also our hormones, our metabolism, and our adrenals, which is basically our whole endocrine system. And basically this oil here is like the puzzle piece that brings everything together in our system so that we have more energy inside, coming from within us, and we're feeling better. And it's the first time that you apply it, you kind of get like the energy of it, because the minty fresh smell is just amazing. Once you've used it so many times, it's kind of like, yep, I smell it, it's there. But the first time, the second time, is just so invigorating. It was amazing. I remember applying it for the first time. It was just amazing. What else did I want to share? The endocrine system, it's saying that, right, like I was sharing, if you don't have diabetes, or if you have diabetes or you have a thyroid imbalance, that's when you would know of the endocrinologist. And more, you're hearing people that are going to endocrinologists because of the medical, imbalances, and they're just going to prescribe medication. They're not going to be able to tell you, like, stop eating the processed foods, eat whole foods, and get some good rest. And like a good leader here, I'm already in my jammies. I'm already in my jammies because I have to wake up very early, but it's so important to support our body. And I think that's pretty much it. I mean, it's just been an amazing experience, and the energy slump, I barely ever feel it. And I am not sleeping as much as I want, because unfortunately life does happen and we can't get to bed as early as we always want to. But having all of these different things in my system is just a great support.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gigi. I appreciate you sharing. And we are I talked about just our bodies we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And all the endocrine system is such an indicator of how everything's connected. Because if one thing is off, it throws something else off, that throws something else off. But the opposite is true too. If we can get one thing in balance, it can help with something else that was out of balance. And that's why when people find out that as they start to deal with one thing, something gets resolved that they didn't expect, that they weren't even working on. It's because everything's connected. And that's why it's so important to nourish every part of our body, because you never know what else it's affecting without even realizing it. And that's true between our physical bodies and our emotional bodies, because it's all interconnected. We aren't separate beings. We are made for all of it to work together. So in March, I am still working out the schedule, but we are going to be focusing a lot on the importance of self-care and the different, we're not talking about selfish care. We're talking about healthy self-care, because a lot of times I think it's misrepresented in how it's explained. So we'll talk about that more in March, but we'll be talking more about emotions and how to make sure that we are guarding our mental health as well as our physical health. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Amy, for all that good information, and Gigi, and Crystal had to jump off, but she had some great things to share that will have us all pondering things for a while, I'm sure. So y'all have an amazing evening. Get plenty of sleep. Make sure you use your oils and have your little red light on your diffuser. so it doesn't disrupt your sleep. And we will see you soon. Thank y'all. Good night.